Good morning. Welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. Hope everyone had a great weekend. We've got some awesome stories to cover for you guys today. So we've got the Department of Justice trying to break up Google's ad business. We got another Google story with Google developing an AI model for creating music based off of a text prompt. And then we've got an OpenAI Shutterstock deal that is changing the way content is created. So excited to talk about these, Evan. Before we dive in too much further, let's highlight our sponsors here real quick. So you mind talking about KY Innovation before we dive in?
For sure. One of our largest sponsors last 2 years. We've been grateful for them. They help startups and entrepreneurs across the state get their businesses off the ground and support them once they're off the ground. So they've supported Middletech and many other companies like my own, Simba. So looking forward to continuing our relationship with them. And if you're an entrepreneur, I encourage you reaching out to the state. They've got a lot of great resources in all regions of the state. So they've got all kinds of accelerators and other programs that they support. So definitely encourage you reaching out to get your company off the ground.
Absolutely. And then we've also got Bolt Marketing, our friend Chase Fairchild, that we're really excited to be working with this season again. They're also a sponsor last season. They helped build middletech.com. So if you're a small business in Lexington looking to have some marketing services done by a really professional company that just makes the whole process a pleasure, definitely check out Bolt Marketing. So both of those are linked in the show notes, and we'd love to see you support those two organizations. So first off, how's your weekend?
It was good, man. I had a lot going on this weekend.
It's a good weekend.
Got that condo we're starting to move into.
Mm-hmm.
UK basketball, bad loss.
Yeah, where do you stand with should Cal stay or should he go?
I'm still kind of in the middle. I mean, I don't think he's the caliber of coach he's been going up against, like Kansas, some of the other losses earlier in the season to what are some other examples earlier in the season?
Honestly, after the first
Michigan
games,
State was a great example. Michigan State. I don't think he's as good of a coach as some of these other coaches across the country. He's a great recruiter. And I think we're starting to see that.
Yeah. I think that's always been the case. He prepares them for the NBA, which
a lot of the excuse over the past several years has been he's got too young of a team. And this year he doesn't. He's got a pretty senior team. So that excuse is no longer relevant for him.
Yeah. Well, chime in the comments on YouTube if you've got a take. If you're a UK fan, you've got a take on should Calipari stay or should he go? Another devastating loss for this area.
But the other thing is like if we get rid of him, who are we going to replace him with?
Well, exactly.
He is one of the better
I know
coaches in the country.
I know a few of my friends have opinions on it. So also another devastating loss for the area last night. The Bengals went down, destroying our hopes of another Bengals Super Bowl. So that's no fun. But moving on to better, more fun things. Before we dive into these stories, we want to start giving updates on events going on in the ecosystem. Events are something we want to start really investing in this season. And we've got a couple good ones coming up in February. So each episode will start just highlighting what's coming up the coming month. So the first one is 5 Across. You've heard us talk about it before. It's an incredible event to attend. We will both be at that event listening to the companies pitch their ideas. So that's going to be on February 22nd, which is a Wednesday. That's going to be from 5 to 7 p.m. And that's going to be at Main on Main downtown. So it's a really cool venue. Austin Mink does a fantastic job putting those on. Check those out. And then we are actually partnering with Commerce Lex to host an event for their Emerging Leaders program. This will be a private event, but if you're interested in attending it, reach out to us. We can likely secure a few seats for our listeners. But what the event is going to be is an interview with Space Tango in the planetarium at the Living Sciences Center. It's going to be really sweet. So we're excited about that. That is coming up on February 27th from 4 to 6 p.m. So some cool events coming up to look forward to if you are in the Lexington ecosystem. Now, before diving in, because Jake really wants us to do it, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, follow us at Middle Tech Pod on all socials, listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts. So we've been bad about saying that. Jake's giving us a big thumbs up right now. All right, let's dive into it. So we've got another Google antitrust lawsuit going on here. They are trying to break up Google's ad business. And I don't know if this is the right approach to take when trying to claim monopolistic activities here. So Evan, I'll let you kick us off by summarizing the story, giving your thoughts on it, and let's get into it.
Yeah. So Google, obviously one of the largest players in the ad space and definitely on the search ad space. So the government's claiming that the market at question here is a combination of publisher ad servers, ad exchanges, and advertiser networks. So I'll get into what those three things are. But the three sides of the advertising stack that Google has the largest hand in here. So they're basically demanding a few things. They're demanding breaking up some of the technology they use. But let me dig into what these technologies are. And so ad servers are the technological engines that allow advertisers and publishers to optimize, manage, and distribute ads across a multitude of paid channels. So in Google's case, that channel is search and video on YouTube. And ad exchange is a technology used in programmatic advertising that facilitates the buying and selling of digital inventory. So this is the real-time bidding network that happens across the internet, but definitely on search. And then the ad network, which is the intermediary between the ad publisher and advertiser by matching the ad space available on a publisher's website or app to the right ads. Mm-hmm. So the thing that Google has done here is because they have such a dominant market share in search, they've got so much data on people, on how they're interacting with the internet, because the first place that a person goes when they go to the internet is typically Google. And so from there, Google has a lot of data and knows what people are searching for, what products they might need. And they're using that data to then match the people on the internet to ads across the internet on whatever destination they get to. So the problem with Google is they own the search, and then because they own the search, they're able to place ads on all the websites across the internet very effectively. And so the government is arguing here that they're stepping in front of competition that also wants to serve ads on the internet. And so whenever somebody apparently has tried to get in between Google and advertisers, Google either buys the company or they just don't allow them to participate in the ad network like they would themselves. So that's kind of what's going on here. A monopoly, is by definition whenever a company is using their market share, market power to influence prices in a negative way for consumers. So we'll see what comes out in the trial on that. The problem with this, I think, in my mind, is one, if you look at the broader advertising space, why don't you pull that up, Logan? Yeah. We've got a graph here.
Yeah. So from the All In podcast here, they had a fantastic discussion on this topic last Friday. If you don't listen to All In podcast, highly recommend it. But yeah, here's the graph that's breaking down the percentage of total U.S. digital ad spending. So you can see here at the bottom, we've got Google's part of the market represented by 26.5%. And then the rest comprised by Meta, Amazon, and then 43% is other, which would be just a diverse group of competitors. What they're saying here in this section of the All In podcast is this is not what you'd expect to see when dealing with monopolistic activities. I mean, what is your thought when you see this? Does this tell you that they're going after the wrong part of the business, or does this tell you something different?
Well, yeah, no, I don't think it's great for the U.S.'s case here. I do think that if they were to narrow it down just on, delivering ads on search, maybe they'd have, better chance. Maybe this graph will change here.
Yeah.
But if you look at the grand scheme of things in the advertising space, there is really healthy competition. I mean, this is a pretty healthy chart. You definitely want to see other have the majority. And then there's always, no matter what industry you look across, there's going to be a few dominant players. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of the experts in the kind of antitrust space think this is going to be a major uphill battle for the U.S. government here. I definitely think it will too. I think Google just has built such a premium product that people want to use, and that's why they have the biggest market share. So, yeah, I'm definitely not one that wants to first thing try to break a company up, especially in this case when it's not very clear that they own the majority of the market. So I'm always one that is kind of hesitant to promote government regulation.
Yeah. One of the interesting dynamics that the All In crew dove into yesterday is the fact that the Department of Justice is demanding that they break up two previous acquisitions that kind of bolstered this advertising business. So that was 12 years ago, a company called AdMeld, and another was 15 years ago, a company called DoubleClick. This was discussed in depth as well on the All In podcast, and I think they really nailed it there. The point that I kind of got from it is, do we want to have a government that can look back, 15 years in this case and say, hey, actually, we're not cool with this acquisition. This seems anti-competitive, and then go back and reverse it. Their argument was that we need to be writing our laws in a way to where if there's something problematic that could happen, it's prevented by law and not retroactively gone back and said, oh, this has to be reversed. Because when you make an acquisition, you want to know you're good to go. You don't want to have this possibility that in 10 years, the government could come back and reverse this. I thought that was the best point that was essentially made about how they're going about this and kind of what the case itself actually says. What do you think in terms of that? When I see that, what that kind of worries me about, and what they were talking about on the podcast as well, is that seems like a government just kind of lashing out at a company for being successful and like trying to grasp at straws in this case.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you get into the more nuanced discussion about search and Google's dominance of search. But with this ad business, I just don't see it. I just don't see it.
No, I mean, I wouldn't support that at all. I think that, again, like you said, if a company acquires somebody, then they need to be able to integrate that company deeply into their own processes and systems. And then if you have to go back and rip those out, then acquisitions just would be not as popular, which I think acquisitions are a healthy thing. So I'm definitely not thinking that the U.S. government's going to really get very far with this. And plus,
I don't think it will
these
either.
kind of cases take a very long time to get through anyways. I mean, it takes years to even get the trial started. So there's a lot of work here that needs to be done. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't ever happen, actually.
Yeah, I don't think it will. All right, let's move on to our next Google story here. So Google in the news a lot this week. We have got a new AI model, which there seems to be one that comes out every freaking week these days. This new AI model, according to Google, and we'll link to the study in the show notes. They released a study that said they've created a machine learning AI model that can create music based off of a text prompt. So what that does is you can go in and type, violin, backdrop, dramatic, makes listener feel a certain type of way. And it can go and spin up a music clip that would match that description of the text that you put in. So it's no surprise that it seems like every type of content medium out there is now being augmented by artificial intelligence. You train an AI on this huge data set. Let's say in this case it was music, and now you're seeing all of these new applications being built that you can take to create using artificial intelligence. So I think this one is super interesting. The really interesting part about this, though, is that Google does not want to release it. And I think that's a very important conversation that I think we're going to start having more on this podcast about the intersection of AI and copyright law. So when you think about how this program was likely created, it was trained on a large data set of music. I guarantee not all of that music in that data set was copyright free. Yeah. Like there's got to have been music in there that, it's licensed to somebody else. And I think that's likely going to be the reason that they're not going to release this. I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. The person who I wanted to have on, and I think we'll have a whole episode kind of talking about this, is Brian Fry, who's a copyright lawyer at UK Law, and just kind of dive into the ins and outs of this. But anyway, off the top, what do you notice about the story? What stands out to you?
Yeah, I'm just curious, back to kind of the copyright, where that database is they're pulling this music from. I'm curious about one, who owns the database. I'm sure there's several places they're pulling this audio from. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'm curious about is how are they matching basically music and sounds to, for instance, feelings or descriptive words of that music to then generate something. For instance, when you say, make me a clip that is sad. I want to know what databases they're connecting or how they're labeling music in this case to do that. That's a lot of training that needs to take place. And I'm wondering if they're tapping into a database that has a lot of those connections already made, or if they've been doing this in the background for several years, because, that's quite the database, and to match, the multitude of types of sounds that are out there with, moods and other descriptive terms. That's pretty impressive. And that's a lot of training that needs to happen. So this is a big deal. This model's really, in a broader scheme of things, take the word music out of it, it's just audio. I think that this is more digestible, and they put it out into the media as music AI, but really like it's just audio. So it has a lot of applications beyond music.
Yeah, I think what this makes me think of, and just kind of looking at the broader artificial intelligence software that's rolling out, just kind of one by one right now, it seems like I think kind of the pipe dream of all of these AI tools that are essentially automating content creation are this future where we imagine that you're able to go in and let's say a movie, for example, you're able to insert in the script of a movie, describe all of the scenes in detail, enter that into an AI model of some sort, and it creates all the characters, it creates all the scenes, it creates all the music, it creates all the dialogue. That's something that's kind of hard to wrap your mind around right now, but that's where these technologies are heading. The further down this road we go of being able to create images based off text prompts, being able to create, entire like blogs and scripts and things like that with ChatGPT, being able to create music now. And this stuff is just now starting. Like this has been in the last 6 months that we started seeing all these advances. And to be frank, you're going to start hearing a lot more about AI, not only on this podcast, but you can see the general public is now starting to see what's really going on. I saw a stat this morning just scrolling on Instagram that said that 30% of professionals have now tried ChatGPT at their job, which, wrapping up this story to lead into the next one, we're also talking about Shutterstock and OpenAI. So they have now also signed a deal. Evan, I'll let you dive into this one a little bit deeper.
Yep.
But where I was going with that is after this section, we're also going to start talking about how to use artificial intelligence to make yourself more productive, more efficient, automate tasks you don't want to be doing in your life. So that's a little sneak peek for what's coming after this next section. Seemed to make sense there. Give us an overview of Shutterstock and the OpenAI deal.
Yeah, so Shutterstock and OpenAI have basically coined a partnership here. What's going on is Shutterstock's core business is under threat. They basically are serving people stock photos for advertising purposes, for content purposes. They own a large library of copyrighted photos that professional photographers upload to the site and then can sell, and then they get a small percentage of those sales, but they're basically providing the public with a network of stock photos. What's ended up happening with DALL-E is people can go to DALL-E and type in what they need for a stock photo, and DALL-E just produces it. While it might not be as good quality as a photographer, it's not difficult to understand that here soon it will be as good as a photographer. So basically what Shutterstock's doing here is they're trying to prevent themselves from being disrupted in the future, and they're partnering with this AI rather than be scared of it. They're kind of being proactive here, and they're basically allowing users inside the Shutterstock platform to create these AI-generated images. They basically will license them on the spot. So if you're creating an AI image within Shutterstock, you can basically create a license around that image and then sell it and use it for your own purposes. So they're basically allowing people to generate photos just like they would go onto the site and find a stock photo. So Shutterstock's done a few deals like this. OpenAI is not the only one. They've done it with Meta. So Meta has some artificial intelligence that they've been using and licensing for some AI data sets and functions within the platform. So the theme here, I think, is what we're seeing across the tech space. This is going to rapidly ramp up, is this idea of like model as a service. So like an AI model that people are licensing to incorporate their own data and images into. That's kind of one of the future business models that will expand very rapidly. And OpenAI and Meta and Google are kind of leading that charge. Google had one, TensorFlow, that was very popular. That's behind a lot of artificial intelligence platforms that we're familiar with. But here comes OpenAI and Meta. And so they're really pushing, and Shutterstock's one of their new customers.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway for me out of this story is Shutterstock taking this step to not be, well, they're going to be disrupted by AI, but rather than stand by and let it happen, to make this partnership and supercharge the underlying business that is Shutterstock. I think that's what a lot of a lot of companies should be looking to do. They should be looking at how can we leverage AI? How can we make AI work for us and make our business more efficient, increase our margins, make us more productive, whatever it is. There are so many possibilities to enhance business models with these AI models. And I agree with what you're saying here, that this is a whole new business model that's popping up. I like the way you put it, models as a service. I think this is just the beginning. We're just the front end of
One
this.
thing about this is the way to think about these models is, DALL-E is really just a model. And if you go to OpenAI's website and maybe you're on the early user list, you're really just interfacing with it through OpenAI's kind of interface. But OpenAI really didn't already have a captured audience. And so the thing here is why this is important is because Shutterstock already had a captured audience, and now they're just layering in that AI. So it benefits both OpenAI, who has this model but doesn't have distribution, and then it benefits Shutterstock, who has the distribution but doesn't have the model. And so that's kind of the key thing here in the developer space is, that's why APIs exist. That's why so much of the technology being built this day is usage-based. And so companies like Shutterstock can incorporate these new technologies pretty seamlessly into their platforms and find new ways to get revenue. So the theme of what AI will become is, acquire an audience, have some unique data that you have within that audience. In Shutterstock's case, they have a lot of unique data on what stock photos people care about. They know what high quality photography looks like that they can feed into these models and then push out, to their audience that wants this high quality content, more content using AI. So that's kind of the theme here. One thing that, I've been paying close attention to that I think we're just in the beginnings of is when this stuff gets really good, I think the value of content in general trends to zero. And so that is music, images, video, especially anything written, articles, blogs. I think the value is going to go to as close to zero as it possibly can. And the thing that's going to provide content value is the personality, the engagement around the content, not the content itself. So I think what AI is going to do is make content so easily created that the people that are just creating generic content and happen to be monetizing it today, they're going to get disrupted, or the competitors that make it highly personalized, niche, and engaging are going to take them out. So that's one way that I think people need to prepare if you're a content creator and think about is what about your content is going to stand out when AI just generates it for you. So if you are a writer for, let's say, a newspaper and you write articles all day on, let's say, breaking news or opinions, and you're really not providing maybe a whole lot of personal touch, or you're not including a lot of people from a really niche audience, I would argue that the value of what you're creating is going to go to zero at some point here in the next few years. So just pay attention to that. So if you're a publisher across anything content-wise, just really ask yourself, how do I differentiate from AI? And that's going to be a tough question over the next several years that a lot of people are going to have to grapple with.
Yeah, I think if anything, it's good news for like the solo creator. I think personal brands are about to be supercharged by AI. If you can build this AI software stack around you that helps you be a more efficient and a better writer, helps you create content in less time and more efficiently, that's great news for content creators that are really leaning into a personal brand. So I agree with you. I think that the cost of content is going to continue to, or the value of content is going to continue to fall to zero as we see these things become more prevalent. I think one of my favorite ones that I'm still on the wait list for, and this is another thing, is a big tip about getting access to these AI tools. As soon as you hear about them, get on the wait list, because a lot of them are not just like anybody can join. You have to get on a wait list and then get approved for it. As soon as you see it, get on that wait list.
Yeah, I got DALL-E months before.
Yeah, I was pissed about that.
Yeah,
you had access to it way earlier, and I was like, this is the most mind-blowing technology I've ever seen.
I had access to ChatGPT, a couple months before everybody else. You just gotta be plugged in. And,
for sure.
For instance, I mean, we'll get into tips, but being on that wait list, I was able to create. My co-founder Ryan and I were able to create blogs. All the blogs on our on our website for Simba are now AI generated, and we just go in and kind of put our own opinions and edit them a bit. But we wrote 10 blogs in about 20 minutes.
It's insane.
That would take a normal writer. That would probably take them a day.
It's insane. We use software called Jasper AI at Leadrilla, soon to be Sales River. We have used that to create all of our website copy. We've used that to write blogs that are supposed to rank high in SEO. We use it to write a press release that is actually going to be coming out later this week. It makes it really easy to, optimize what you're trying to write for a certain purpose. It's like, hey, if we're trying to drive this user activity on our website, you put that into the program, you put some of the key points around your software, the service you're offering, and boom, the AI does the rest for you. It's truly insane. It's an insane time we're living in. All right, let's move on to this new section. So this is an idea that Evan kind of came up with last night as a new section that we felt like we could offer some value on the podcast, and I'm pretty excited to dive into this. So we're calling it the AI Edge, and we basically just want to give tips that help you gain an advantage using artificial intelligence. I think that quote that I just said that I saw on Instagram earlier today, 30% of professionals have tried ChatGPT at their jobs, is indicative of where we're heading, just in terms of how we supplement ourselves with this software. So we wanted to just give some tips on how we're using it to be more efficient or to do things that we think are cool. I'll say a lot of what I'm doing with it involves writing. So that's why, ChatGPT is great with that, whether it's writing and communication for my job within sales or whether it's writing and communication for things like middle tech. So let's just kind of get into first a broad overview of ChatGPT, how it was created, its limitations, its capabilities. I know we talked about it before. I think it's just helpful at the top of this new kind of section here to talk about that. So Evan, you're pretty good at describing how this thing was built, what it can do, what it can't do. So dive into that part of it real quick, and then let's share some tips with the listeners.
Yeah, for sure. So the whole generative AI model or movement, rather, I'll kind of back up, has been growing over the last several years. And basically the idea of that is using vast amounts of data and really powerful models to produce content using basically content on the internet as inspiration and using predictive models to basically generate new content based on what you prompt it to spit out. So basically what that means is artificial intelligence is taking, let's say, a sentence that you describe an image with, and then spitting out that image based on that sentence. So in this case, ChatGPT is very language based. And so if you put in, write me a blog about, let's say, tigers in India and what they like to eat, it will put out a blog. And if you tell it even further to write a 500 word blog, it'll write something close to a 500 word blog. So it's really something that is, you give it a command, or a prompt is the name of that, and then it spits out a result, which is being generated by the model and the data it has behind it. And so OpenAI, their ChatGPT model in particular, has licensed vast amounts of internet data from many different locations across the internet, and use that data to build a very powerful predictive model. And then when you type in a command again, it spits it out. But the unique thing about ChatGPT that's so different about artificial intelligence and why it's grown so fast and kind of captured the attention of the public is it's just done in like a chat interface that feels like a text message. Mm-hmm. That is the first time artificial intelligence has really been easily consumed by the public without any previous knowledge. So that's why it's a big deal. They open it up to the public. You just go to openai.com and it will pull up ChatGPT for you to play with and try. Right now, the way that you can access it is just, like I said, through that website. But here soon, I'm sure they're going to start charging for it. But if you go on there now, the way that they're allowing access is if there's not a lot of demand for it. So you might go on the website, it might tell you you can't use it right now because there's a lot of high traffic. So that just tells me that they're about to start charging for it because...
Well, they introduced a paid tier, right? Like $47 a month or something?
I haven't seen that on their actual website. I think they're starting to put out like content to see what the internet feels. Yeah. But all that to say, the first model that I think everybody should play with is ChatGPT.
For sure.
I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, can you sit me down and take me to coffee and tell me how to use this? And I think this is a great segment to kind of reach a broader audience with these kind of tips.
Yeah. I think the one last thing I'll say just around like limitations of ChatGPT, Evan mentioned it was trained on the internet, on internet data. That's internet data from 2021 back. So it's not currently connected to the internet. So anything you ask about like current events or things that have happened post 2021, it's not going to be able to perform that. So that's likely what we predict is going to happen, is why Microsoft has invested billions and billions and billions of dollars into OpenAI, is because Microsoft is eventually going to build a search competitor to Google that is powered by this software. So that is an overview of what it is. Let's talk a little bit about how to use it effectively. So the first tip that I want to give about using ChatGPT effectively is learning to communicate with it effectively. And just to describe this point, I want to tell a quick anecdote from an assignment that I was probably in middle school, where the teacher essentially asked us students to create a instruction manual for creating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then he stood up at the front of the class and tried to use our instruction manual to create that peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And if you've done this little experiment before, it's kind of like a team building exercise. You know that the teacher gets up there and like, if it's not in the instructions, they just don't do it. So you have to be like super descriptive on how you describe building that peanut butter and jelly sandwich. ChatGPT is no different. The more detail and context that you give it, the more relevant response it's going to give to you. So if you just say like, write me a blog about tigers, that's going to go out and just write a blog that might be all over the place, might not even contain any of the points that you wanted to hit. I found the more effective way to get it to produce content for you that's more relevant to what you want is to first in your own head, and this is where human creativity and like your own take on things comes into it, lay out like the main points that you want that blog to have. Say like, okay, I want to talk about tigers' diets, and then I want to talk about their ecosystem, and I want to talk about how they're endangered, include these points, write it in this tone, and then you plug that into ChatGPT, and that's where things get really wild. So the more context, the more detail, the better you learn to communicate with the software, the more relevant responses you're going to get from it, and the more effective it's just going to be all around. Do you have anything to add to that tip?
No, I think that's great. I think that's kind of a great place to start is just be very cognizant of, what you're typing in. They're very finicky models. There is going to be this idea of kind of prompt engineering, where basically the people that can write the best prompts are going to get the best, outputs, and people are going to gravitate towards those quality prompts. So this is kind of the early stages of this idea of prompt engineering. The better you can write a prompt, the better you're going to be at utilizing this technology.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Tip number 2. Do you want to dive into this one, or do you want me to? Okay. The second one that I put down here is ask for elaboration and specificity. So when let's say, for example, a lot of my friends have been using it to help them brainstorm, like whether it's a work assignment or, what have you. So I'm going to use an example that an actual friend told me this week. He helps manage musicians, and he was talking with a record label, and they're like, hey, tell us what you're going to do over the next year. I think like 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years for this artist to help grow them. He went to ChatGPT and put in how to grow an artist from 4,000 monthly Spotify listeners to 10,000 in X amount of time. And it spits out 10 suggestions from that. So then what this tip really involves is it's going to spit out 10 responses or like 10 answers, like here's how you can grow that artist, for example. What you need to do from there, don't just take that on the surface, take each of those responses it gives you and then say, be more specific, elaborate on this. How can I do this part specifically? The more you ask for specificity and elaboration from it, and you literally can just type, be more elaborate. And oftentimes that will give you an even more detailed and in-depth response. But you can start broad, see what it produces for you, find something you want to latch onto, and then really start to dig down into it and say, hey, be as specific as you can, elaborate on this, change your wording here and there, tweak it. And that's really what can produce some pretty incredible results for you too. So that friend that I mentioned literally created a whole proposal for a music label that details how he's going to help this artist grow. And now, given he has a lot of experience in this, he knows what he's doing. It's not like it's just, he could have done it without ChatGPT, but it supercharged his creative process. It basically just allowed him to leapfrog the brainstorming process and just get to the kind of this final endpoint where he can refine things, use his own expertise to make it more relevant. And anyway, that's how I've kind of been using it as well. Is just it's a simple thing. Just ask it to elaborate. Do you have any experience with that?
I do. So, for instance, in my own company, I was putting together a proposal to our engineering team to incentivize them to get their engineering, sprints done as fast as possible, and give them, bonuses if they reached certain milestones. And I said, "Hey, ChatGPT, how should I incentivize my team? Give me some tips." And they gave me some tips that a few of them I already had put into place, some of them I didn't. So, really, I think what we're talking about here is the idea of if a professional is using ChatGPT, and let's just assume, in some industry, all the professionals are using ChatGPT, then the professionals that are the most creative and think outside the box are going to win, because ChatGPT is going to give the most basic answers, the stuff that should be obvious, in hindsight, and then somebody's going to have to put their own creative flair into it. So I think what this is ultimately going to do is push every industry forward very rapidly, because everybody's going to have some level of understanding about a topic, because ChatGPT can teach them very quickly. And it's going to be, how do I continue to dig deeper in creative ways to create something that ChatGPT couldn't? That's going to be what happens in every industry. Is it's all going to become very similar if everybody uses ChatGPT. And the ones that stand out are going to be the ones that, augment ChatGPT with their own creative processes. So, Nick, in that case, our friend who's in the music industry, is a great example.
Yeah, I love it. I totally agree with you there. All right. Third and final tip for giving yourself an advantage with artificial intelligence is role playing. So what I mean by role playing is literally assign some sort of role or identity to ChatGPT, and then use that to frame the question or prompt that you're giving it. So I saw this one on Instagram. This came from 1:37 p.m.'s account. They shared, I think, a TikTok of somebody going in and essentially giving man, the more you say that, the more of a tongue twister it turns into. ChatGPT, basically saying, hey, pretend you're a doctor and I'm a patient and you're giving me advice on how to live a healthier life. When you frame it and say, hey, you have this area of expertise, that helps frame the prompt a little bit more efficiently and maybe a little bit more cohesively or concisely, rather, for how to give you a response back. So really, all of these tips, I mean, that's none of these tips are super groundbreaking. It's just how can we communicate with this AI software to help us get more relevant responses from it.
Yeah, I typed in a random one here. Yeah. I said, act like you're Benjamin Franklin and tell me about your birth. And it generated an awesome response here. It says, greetings, my name is Benjamin Franklin. I was born January 17th, 1706 in Boston. And it just keeps going. There's about 5 paragraphs here of Benjamin Franklin talking to me through ChatGPT, in his own voice. And it might not be his own voice, but if the data in the model was, maybe some of it was directly from autobiographies or biographies from Benjamin Franklin, and he had quotes in there, it might know how he speaks, and it might actually talk like that. I could say, hey, act like you're Benjamin Franklin and you're a pirate and tell me about your birth. And it'll speak like it's a pirate, as if it was Benjamin Franklin talking in first person about his birth and the way he was, raised. Yeah. That's kind of how this stuff starts to get crazy, and the more creative and the better kind of prompts you put in there, the better results you're going to get. That's what's fun about this.
And that's the whole point here. This stuff is so fun to play with. So the best way to learn it is go and play with it. Don't wait until you have a perfect use case and be like, oh, could ChatGPT help with this? No, just go pull it up. If you can get access to it, go and just type in random shit, see what pops up. So that is the AI Edge. We're very excited about this little segment. We're just going to give 3 tips each week at the end of the podcast, talking about how you can use artificial intelligence to give yourself an advantage in whatever it is you do. So we plan on making some cool content around that. Good idea, Evan. I thought that turned out well.
Yep.
Idea to execution.
You create what the world needs, and I had a few people reach out to me and ask me how to use it. I don't have time to talk to every person and tell them how to use it. I've got my own things I'm doing. So let's just scale that and put it out in the world and make a product out of it.
Heck yeah, brother. I love it. This has been one of my favorite episodes we've done this season. This is a good one. Thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. I'll reiterate just for Jake's pleasure here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're really making a big push to do this in a more professional way. You see, we've got like the nice green screen setup and mics and everything. Evan and I are both in person. Really excited about what's going on this season. Just a couple things to look forward to. We're getting better and better about this format and how we want to facilitate it. So we do plan on continuing to do some founder interviews here and there. So we've got some more and different types of content coming up later in the season. We're just trying to nail one thing before we move on to the next. So thank you guys for tuning in. Everyone have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and we will talk to you next Monday. Thanks for tuning in.
Yep, see you, everybody.